Order! Order! Questions to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Mr. David Hanson.
Number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Mr. Speaker, thanks to this government, the British people will at last have their say on British membership of the European Union. The Bank of England is, of course, independent, and any questions about their publication should be directed at them. But the priority of the British government is clear. The best outcome for the UK economy is that we achieve major economic reform of the European Union for the benefit of Britain and for the whole of Europe. That is why the Prime Minister and the rest of the government is now fighting hard to achieve that, and we're confident we will succeed.
Mr. David Hanson.
Airbus Industries, Toyota Vehicles, Vauxhall Motors, all serving my constituency, employ thousands of people and have all said they believe the future of the UK economy is in Europe. Would it not be useful for the Chancellor to put pressure on the Bank of England to produce any internal reports and indeed to publish any Treasury reports so that we can see once and for all what exit from the European Union would mean for our UK economy?
Well, I completely agree with him that companies like Airbus make a huge contribution to the economy, not just of North Wales, but the whole United Kingdom, and we want them to succeed. That is why we want the European Union to be a place which attracts jobs and investment from around the world. And that is why we are seeking reforms, because we do not think at the moment the European Union is heading in the right direction. And I welcome his participation in this debate, and I can assure him the Treasury will be participating as well.
Andrew Tyrie.
The bank may be operationally independent, but does the Chancellor agree that Parliament and the Treasury Committee are likely to see the bank as having a duty to share its thinking, at least as far as it affects its statutory objectives of monetary and financial stability, on the impact of the UK's membership of the EU?
Chancellor.
Well, I certainly don't presume to tell the yet-to-be-formed Treasury Select Committee how it goes about its business, but I would be very surprised if they didn't want to have sessions on this vital issue of Britain's future membership of the European Union. And, of course, it's within their power to ask the Bank Governor and, indeed, other members of the Bank of England to attend, and they do attend on a regular basis. I think it would be very surprising if the Bank of England was not engaged in these crucial economic and financial issues. That is part of their statutory responsibilities, and I think we'd all be disappointed if they weren't engaged.
31% of businesses surveyed by Ernst & Young have said that they will either freeze or cut investment until the result of the EU referendum is known. Does he accept that that uncertainty is going to cripple our economy until it is sorted out once and for all? And does he accept that that is a reason for bringing forward the date of the referendum as fast as possible?
Well, first of all, if he's worried about the effect of the EU referendum, why did he vote to have one? We've heard this argument over the last couple of years that the fact of having a referendum would put a dampener on investment. In fact, we've attracted the lion's share of investment into the European Union since my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, set out our policy and won now public support for that policy. Of course, we now want to resolve the uncertainty, but the way to do that is to achieve a good deal in the European Union and put that deal to the British people at the referendum, and we will have the referendum when we have the deal.
Mr. Philip Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that even the most fanatical supporters of our membership of the European Union now accept that we could trade freely with the EU even if we left, can the Chancellor set out for us exactly what we get for our £19 billion a year membership fee?
Well, I would certainly commend my honourable friend for his consistency, because I remember his maiden speech when he made his case for Britain leaving the European Union, and of course he will have his opportunity in the referendum. Look, I would say this is precisely the judgment that the British people and this Parliament have to make, which is what are the economic benefits of our European Union membership, such as the single market, and what would be the alternative, and that's going to be part of the lively debate, and as I say, the Treasury is going to be fully involved in that debate.
Mr. Stewart, Hosie.
Mr. Speaker, there have already been a number of serious interventions into this debate suggesting that the in-out referendum will be disruptive for inward investment. At the very least, those businesses seeking to invest need is certainty to know what the Chancellor believes success will be in the Prime Minister's negotiations. So can he tell the House today what he will consider success in terms of the outcome of the Prime Minister's negotiations?
Chancellor.
Well, there are, of course, a number of things we want to achieve, but speaking from my responsibilities as Chancellor Exchequer, I want to make sure that the European Union works for the citizens of the European Union and the citizens of the United Kingdom, and that means a place where businesses want to grow, where jobs are created, where investment is attracted around the world. I don't want Europe to be the place that used to be the dynamic centre of the world and isn't any longer, and that is exactly what we're fighting for. And if we achieve it, it will be a success.
To see a dynamic EU, but there was no specifics in that. Is it not the case that, however bad the negotiations, the Chancellor will declare them a success, and however good the negotiations, the out-to-any-cost brigade will declare them an unmitigated disaster? Is the truth not that instead of pandering to this UKIP agenda, the government should simply pull the whole idea of this daft referendum?
Well, I don't want to. I don't want to say this to the SNP spokesman, but I'm not sure he's speaking for Scotland, because 58% of Scots want a referendum and 63% of SNP supporters want a referendum. So he needs to get in touch with his grassroots.
James Gray.
Mr. Speaker, it is, of course, extremely important this Bank of England report, and indeed other government or other organisations' reports on this matter should be published during the course of the next 2 years. But would the Chancellor Exchequer not agree with me that it's vitally important that these documents, which may well affect the outcome of the referendum, should not be published in the so-called purdah period of 6 to 8 weeks before the referendum itself?
Well, as was made clear by the Foreign Secretary in the debate and indeed by the Prime Minister from this dispatch box, there are serious issues which we have to address about the current law as it stands around referendums, and we believe it would make unworkable and inappropriate the debate on the European Union. Now, we, of course, have understood the concerns on all sides of the House about this, and we will come forward with reassurances that enable the proper business of government to continue and the government to make the case for the outcome it has achieved and the vote it recommends, but not make sure there isn't an unfair referendum and that the government doesn't engage, for example, in mass communication with the electorate. Those are the things that are going to be discussed, I know, later today.
Shabana Mahmood.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The debate and conduct of the referendum campaign must be and be seen to be both legitimate and well informed. So will the Chancellor, as he has failed to do thus far this morning, make clear today that he agrees that in the interest of transparency, the Bank of England should publish full details of their risk assessment, codenamed Project Bookend, its terms of reference, its personnel and timetable, and will he add his voice to our call that any publication of this report must happen well in advance of the vote?
Well, first of all, can I welcome the Honourable Lady to her new position as Shadow Chief Secretary, and long may she continue in it. The point I would make to her is this: that it is not for me, or dare I say even her, to tell an independent Bank of England what to do. I have no doubt that they will engage in this debate. Indeed, the Governor of the Bank of England has made that perfectly clear. I have no doubt that the Treasury Select Committee, when it is formed, will want to ask the Bank of England questions about the European Union, because it's central to many of their responsibilities. But as I say, we have an independent central bank, and I propose to keep it that way.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Still no clear answer from the Chancellor, I think, and no commitment to pushing for the transparency that this debate demands, because he has a clear responsibility and a role to play in ensuring that the economic impacts are debated and fully understood. Now, I know he has his mind on other things these days, like moving next door to number 10, but if we will do nothing further on Project Bookend, will he at least step up and lead this debate by agreeing to commission and publish reports by the Treasury and the OBR into the economic impact of the UK leaving the EU?
We are certainly, as I said repeatedly in these questions, going to take part in this debate, and the Treasury, I'm sure, will be publishing assessments of the merits of membership and the risks of a lack of reform in the European Union and the damage that could do to Britain's interests. For example, you saw that in the Mansion House speech where I talked about the risks for Britain as a non-Euro member as the Eurozone continues to integrate and how that needs to be addressed as part of the negotiation. So we will take part in this debate, and I think the more we get on to the big issues at stake, rather than focusing on all the process details, the better informed the public will be.
Percy.
Number 2, sir.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I'd like to answer this question along with questions 3 and 4. We have a comprehensive plan to address, to rebalance the economy and create a Northern Powerhouse by bringing together the great cities and counties of the north of England together, indeed alongside plans to support other vital economies in our country like the South West. These plans involve major investment in transport infrastructure, backing science and skills and supporting local businesses. At the centrepiece of the Northern Powerhouse is a commitment to a major transfer of power to our great cities and counties so local people can take more control of the decisions that affect them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend for Cleethorpes and Barton and I were delighted in the last Parliament that the Humber was at the centre of the Northern Powerhouse. Can the Chancellor confirm that the East Riding of Yorkshire and North Lincolnshire will continue to enjoy that position? And with specific local issue in mind, will he continue to prioritise flood defence funding for our region, which is really important for encouraging investment into the Humber?
Chancellor.
Well, I can absolutely confirm to my honourable friend that the Humber, that the East Riding and Northern Lincolnshire are a central part of the Northern Powerhouse. Indeed, when we originally set out the vision of the Northern Powerhouse last year, we talked about this belt stretching all the way from Merseyside across to the Humber. I know about my honourable friend's passionate commitment to improving the flood defences in the Humber. He has already achieved marked success last year, but he's got an even more ambitious project, and as he knows, because of his work and the work of my honourable friend for Cleethorpes, the Environment Agency is now doing a study into that proposal.
Oliver Colville.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. Can I congratulate my right honourable friend for turning the North into a powerhouse as well. But can I ask him what plans he has to ensure that Plymouth and the South West is next?
Order. No. The question is about the Northern Powerhouse and must be confined to the Northern Powerhouse. We're immensely grateful. Mr. David Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in my constituency we have a link road that's been 60 years overdue, and in fact the Prime Minister and the Chancellor came. The Prime Minister actually put a series of bolts into the bridge there. Does my honourable friend agree with me that this road is vital to the improvement of my constituency, and also these types of projects should be rolled out across the area to ensure more vitality in the Northern Powerhouse?
Well, first of all, can I say my honourable friend for Plymouth Sutton is a huge champion of Plymouth and the South West. And we will have time to address the South West in these questions. The Heysham Link Road is a major achievement of my honourable friend. People have been campaigning for 70 years for the Heysham Link Road, and I happened to visit about a week before the general election with the Prime Minister, and because of my honourable friend fighting for infrastructure and jobs in his seat, he's back here doing his job.
Helen Jones.
The Chancellor's talk of a Northern Powerhouse, would he admit that output per hour in the North West is still less than the average for England and in fact lower than it was in 2007? Is it not true that his plan to improve the economy of the North West has drastically failed that region?
Right. Well, first of all, the North West has seen a huge increase in employment. Indeed, it has had the fastest rate of employment growth in the entire United Kingdom, and I would have thought that the Honourable Lady would have welcomed that. But look, the Northern Powerhouse initiative was initially something instigated by myself and the Labour council leaders, and indeed Conservative council leaders of Greater Manchester. And so it's been done on a cross-party basis. I would like to think at the beginning of this Parliament we can work across the party divide in this chamber as well to bring about this major rebalancing of the British economy, which has eluded governments for many generations.
Major employers in the North East, who are the key drivers of the Northern Powerhouse, such as Nissan and Hitachi, have been very clear that membership of the EU is vital to their investment in our region and that they would reconsider their involvement in the UK should we leave the EU. Given the Minister for the Northern Powerhouse, who I can't actually see here with us today, told the Sunday Politics show this weekend that he would vote to come out, will the Minister tell the House what assessment he's made of the impact of the EU on the North East economy and his Northern Powerhouse plans?
Well, first of all, I commend the work that Nissan and other employers do in the North East. The North East, I think at the moment, is producing more cars than the whole of Italy, which is a remarkable achievement and a tribute to the workforce there. I'm glad she mentions my honourable friend from Stockton, who not only returned with an increased majority, but is now playing a central role as the Minister helping to deliver this in the local government department. And these debates are all about the future of our relationship with the European Union and the reform we need to see so that major Japanese car manufacturers, among others, continue to see Europe and indeed the UK as a place they want to come and create jobs and invest. And we're not going to do that if our continent prices itself out of the world economy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud that the coalition government sought to start the rebalancing of the British economy and introduce the Northern Powerhouse scheme, which I support. Now that it seems clear that we are going to have a mayor in the Leeds City region area, can I ask the Right Honourable Gentleman to seriously consider the possibility of having a Yorkshire-wide mayor to rejoin together that wonderful county, which could be a real powerhouse for the whole of this nation?
We got the gist of it, Chancellor.
Well, what I'd say to the honourable gentleman is this. I'm not trying to impose a model on any particular area. It is up to local metro areas to come forward with their proposals, but I am clear that if you are going to see a massive transfer of power from national government to local government, you have to have a single point of accountability, someone who carries the can and drives the process forward. The authorities of Greater Manchester have agreed with me that that should be an elected mayor. Now, as I say, it's up to the authorities of West Yorkshire and indeed the whole of Yorkshire how they want to proceed, and my door is open to a conversation.
Dr. James Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was grateful to Rail Minister Claire Perry for meeting me recently to discuss the upgrading of the North Wales main line. Will the department study the wider economic case for such an upgrade to allow North Wales to link to the proposed HS2 hub at Crewe and, importantly, to tap into the jobs and prosperity which the Northern Powerhouse will bring?
Chancellor.
Well, first of all, can I very much welcome my honourable friend from the Vale of Clwyd to this House, fighting for the interests of North Wales. And he's absolutely right that North Wales is a central part of the Northern Powerhouse. Of course, it is a single economic area, indeed a point made in the opening question of this question time session. And I will take a close look at the rail upgrades that he is calling for, and it's good to see him championing his constituency so soon after being sent to this place.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the North, we know you can have no power without resources. So will the Chancellor be truthful with Northern authorities today and tell us in this financial year how much more is he about to cut them by?
Well, first of all, can I welcome the Honourable Lady to her new position on the Shadow Treasury team. What I would say to her is, of course, we have to make difficult decisions to balance our budget, because if we don't get our public finances into order, there won't be any powerhouse in any part of the country. And that is what we are doing. And it's disappointing that the Labour Party, having worked out that it didn't have any economic credibility, has started this new Parliament by opposing all the savings we make. But as it happens, in the in-year savings I announced, we protected the local government settlement.
Craig McKinley.
Question 5, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I would like to answer this question along with question 10. Thanks to our long-term economic plan, the deficit has more than halved as a share of GDP from its post-war peak of 10.2% in 2009-10 to 4.8% by the end of last year. But the job of fixing the public finances is not yet complete.
Will my right honourable friend confirm that competitive procurement continues across all government departments to ensure value for money for taxpayers in all that we do?
Secretary.
Well, can I first congratulate Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend, on his stellar victory in demolishing both UKIP and Labour. I made a number of visits there myself, Mr. Speaker, and he is truly one of the party's finest campaigners. Mr. Speaker, the government remains committed to improving the value for money of public procurement, building on the significant progress made in the previous Parliament. The Minister for the Cabinet Office and I meet regularly to discuss this, continuing the excellent work of Francis Maud.
Despite being left a note saying there is no money by one of his predecessors,
we won't forget.
Will my right honourable friend confirm he will continue to focus on cutting taxes for low and middle earners in North East Hampshire whilst working to eliminate the deficit so that my constituents pay less tax and less debt interest in the future?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I congratulate my honourable friend on taking his seat and for his fine maiden speech last week. He told us then that, quote, our best days lie ahead. He is quite right, but only if we continue to get our deficit and therefore our debts under control. Thanks to the plans we have set out, we are set to eliminate the deficit altogether and deliver the tax cuts outlined in our manifesto. And we are doing it, Mr. Speaker, with the strong endorsement of the British people last month.
Davies.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, there are 800,000 fewer people earning over £20,000 than there were in 2010. Is this the reason the current government has borrowed more in 5 years than Labour did in 13?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable gentleman is ignoring the overall employment picture of the last Parliament, where we saw unemployment, 2 million new jobs created, unemployment down by 1 million. And it sounds to me as if the Labour Party is starting this Parliament, Mr. Speaker, as they started the last one, in a mode of deficit denial and failing to face up to Britain's problems.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite the Chancellor last week telling us that he was going to get our economy into surplus, we are still £75 billion in the red. Can the Chancellor today set out in some detail how he's going to eliminate that deficit, specifically on the £12 billion of welfare cuts?
Yeah. Well, Mr. Speaker, at least to be fair to her, she has remembered the deficit today. But I have one question for her. During the election campaign, Labour were denying the...
Order. Let me just make it clear. I know the right honourable gentleman is a new minister. The Chief Secretary has no questions for the opposition. That is not the constitutional position. I'm glad he's getting a bit of advice from the Chancellor, and he needs to be clear about that at the start of the Parliament. The right honourable gentleman.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and clearly welfare savings will be set out in due course. I just remind the honourable lady that we all need to confront the deficit, do something about it. I would hope that would create cross-party support.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Does the Chief Secretary agree with me that the key part of reducing the deficit is the long-term economic plan, and that rests on the provision of additional skills from the manufacturing sector, which in turn will drive up the opportunities for young people?
Chief Secretary.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, Mr. Speaker, which is why this government has got an excellent record on the skills agenda and will continue to do so, and I look forward to looking at the funding for the FE sector as part of the spending review this autumn.
John Healey.
Among all 20 of the world's most advanced economies, why have only France, Italy and Japan grown more slowly than the UK in the 5 years that the Chancellor has been in the Treasury? And isn't weak growth, not the deficit, the real problem for the UK economy?
Secretary.
I think, Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable gentleman, he was a former Treasury Minister in the last government, and he will know that due to the size of the deficit that we inherited at more than 10%, one of the very highest that was there, that made our job difficult in the first couple of years. However, the UK is now growing faster in 2014 and in 2015 than any other EU country or G7 country.
T.C. Davies.
Question 6, Mr. Speaker.
Since 2010, the percentage tax gap has stayed lower than at any point under the previous Labour government.
saving the country £4 billion. One of the ways the government will address the tax gap is by tackling tax avoidance and evasion. We have committed to raising at least £5 billion more from measures to tackle evasion, avoidance and aggressive planning within the tax system, and we will announce further details at the budget.
David T.C. Davies.
Speaker, last year Caffeine Nero managed to make £20 million worth of profit and pay not one single penny in corporation tax, unlike many hard-pressed local businesses such as dairy farmers. Does the Chancellor agree with me that we may need to look at the rules about tax-deductible interest payments and, in the meantime, support coffee chains which pay into the system and support their local businesses?
Well, as my honourable friend will be aware, Treasury Ministers don't discuss individual cases, but what I can say is that this government is determined to ensure that we have a competitive tax regime, but where everyone plays by the rules and everyone pays their fair share. We have been involved in a number of crackdowns on tax avoidance, both domestically and at an international level, with the OECD base erosion and profit shifting projects, and we continue to work hard on that.
Well, Mr. Speaker, thank you. It seems that the honourable member for Monmouth doesn't have a lot of confidence in the measures being laid out by his front bench. The tax gap has increased. Never mind percentages; it's increased to £34 billion. The US-Swiss tax deal raised £800 million in 2013, not the forecast £3.2 billion. Despite these failings, the ministers just said about the promise in their manifesto to raise a further £5 billion. Can the minister start to tell us how? He hasn't even brought in tougher penalties on the general anti-avoidance rule.
Well, on the general anti-avoidance rule, we've made clear we are bringing in penalties on specifically that point. The fact is that the yield in the last Parliament, HMRC's yield went up from £17 billion a year to £26 billion a year. The tax gap, as I say, as a percentage has been lower every year under us than in any year under the previous Labour government. And we will be setting out further details in the budget of how we will raise more by dealing with tax evasion, tax avoidance and aggressive tax planning.
Amanda Milling.
Number 7, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the government is. Mr. Speaker, the government is committed to raise the personal allowance to £12,500 and the higher rate threshold to £50,000 by the end of this Parliament. But we will go further than that and ensure that in the future people working 30 hours at minimum wage will not pay income tax.
Amanda Milling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister provide an estimate of the number of people in my constituency of Cannock Chase who will benefit from the implementation of the Conservative Manifesto pledge to increase the personal allowance to £12,500?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. She's quite right to highlight the broad benefit of this policy. Increases in the personal allowance and the higher rate threshold, this Parliament will benefit 30 million people. And whilst it isn't possible to make reliable projections for an individual parliamentary constituency, 2.28 million taxpayers in the West Midlands have benefited from personal allowance increases to date, and a typical basic rate taxpayer is £825 better off as a result.
Kevin Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But as well as any specific tax steps, what steps is he taking to ensure that employers are actually paying the minimum wage?
Well, Mr. Speaker, minimum wage compliance is, of course, absolutely vital, and that work is ongoing. It's also the case that with universal credit, there's more encouragement of people to work more hours, and in general, that people should have higher paid work.
Jeremy Quinn.
Thank you, Speaker. Would my honourable friend join me in welcoming the fact that it's this government, more than any other, making quality childcare accessible to hard-working families?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, he's quite right. The suite of support that this government is providing for families in childcare is unprecedented, including the doubling of the provision for 3- and 4-year-olds, the extension of provision under universal credit, and tax-free childcare.
I think the Minister meant affordably, enabling people thereby also to keep more of their earnings. I'm sure that's what he meant. Margaret Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As part of ensuring that people have more earnings and more income in their pockets, would the Minister assure the House that the Chancellor will not be increasing fuel duty in this forthcoming budget?
Well, Mr Speaker, the government made difficult decisions in the last Parliament to keep fuel duty frozen, saving £9 every time a tank is filled up. Of course, none of these decisions are cost-free and difficult. Other things had to be done in order to be able to afford that. All taxes are kept under review, and my right honourable friend announces details in the budget.
Mr Alan Mack.
Question 8, Mr Speaker.
Minister Harriet Baldwin.
With your permission, Mr Speaker, I'd like to group this question with question 13. This government stands firmly on the side of people who want to work hard, save up, buy their own home and retire with dignity. We've increased ISA allowances, brought in the Help to Buy scheme, introduced pensioner bonds, pension freedoms and taken 95% of people out of tax on their savings.
Mr Alan Mack.
Alongside the support that's been introduced over the last 5 years, one of the most important things to help homeowners is a strong economy and low interest rates. Can my right honourable friend assure my constituents in Havant that the government will continue to ignore the calls from the opposition for more taxes, more spending, which puts our economy at risk and makes it harder to get on the housing ladder?
Mr Speaker, what a pleasure it is to welcome my honourable friend to this chamber, because he is absolutely right. More people in employment than ever before. Mortgage rates are extremely low. That means that our long-term economic plan means his constituents in Havant and constituents elsewhere can now aspire one day to owning their own home.
Stewart.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Policies such as Help to Buy have proved to be very popular in my constituency in Milton Keynes. But can I urge my honourable friend to be more ambitious in the longer term and look at expanding the shared ownership model so that people starting their careers initially can take a small equity share in a property and save up to expand that over the time of their career?
Mr Speaker, can I congratulate my honourable friend on the strong endorsement he's received from the voters of Milton Keynes to return here and express their interests in this House. I'm very pleased to hear that Help to Buy is so popular in Milton Keynes. It's a town that tops the charts in terms of the attractiveness of buying versus renting, and shared ownership is indeed an excellent way to help people take their first steps on the property ladder, and the government remains committed to it.
Meg Hillier.
Speaker, the Minister talked about housing topping the charts in Milton Keynes. In my constituency, we're in danger of topping the charts in house prices, with the average price now £606,000. One of the things that's fuelling this is overseas buyers who purchase a property to either rent it out or not live there. Has the government got any plans to tackle this and help my constituents get on the housing ladder?
Well, I think it was my honourable friend who topped the chart in Milton Keynes himself as well, personally. But the honourable lady raises a very important question, and I know that affordability in terms of London house prices is a key issue for her constituents, and that is why the government has brought in so much support to increase the number of affordable homes. That the number of social homes and affordable homes in the last Parliament increased by over 200,000. We're committed to continuing with that great work, and also to bring in the concept of starter homes, which we hope will add further to housing supply.
Mr Barry Sherman.
Mr Speaker, can I welcome the Minister to her post, genuinely, but say to her, could she be very careful about the right to buy in terms of housing associations? And she look across at cities like Paris, where people on low incomes have been driven out of the city entirely and live in ghettos many, many miles outside. And if we don't build more social housing that's available to lower income people, that will happen in our cities.
Well, I'm sure that the honourable gentleman who kindly welcomes me to my place will welcome the fact that there was more social housing built in the course of the last Parliament than under the entire 13 years of the Labour government. But he rightly raises the point about housing associations. It's incredibly important that we allow more supply of housing association properties, and that's why this government will bring in the right to buy for housing association tenants, which will enable more capital to come into that sector and more housing association properties to be...
Number 11, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
The Government is taking a range of steps to promote home ownership, including helping almost 100,000 households with the Help to Buy scheme. The Government has extended Help to Buy, the equity loan to 2020, introduced a Help to Buy ISA, extended the right to buy, and is delivering 200,000 new starter homes.
Miller. Mr. Speaker, hundreds of Basingstoke residents have a home of their own because of this government's policy of Help to Buy. What assurances can the Minister give today that Help to Buy will continue into the future? Because at this point in time, we're putting together our local plan, which includes a commitment to more affordable housing.
Minister. Well, I can give the Honourable Lady the assurance that the Government wants people who work hard and want to buy their own home to enjoy the security of owning their own home. The equity loan scheme will last until 2020, which should support another 120,000 households in Basingstoke and elsewhere to get onto or up the housing ladder. In addition, as my right honourable friend the Chancellor announced in his recent budget, the Help to Buy ISA is expected to help over 1 million first-time buyers save for a deposit.
We're streeting. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's policies weren't popular in every part of the country, and in particular in my constituency. So can I therefore ask the Minister, as this has been a week for U-turns, if she'll listen to the National Housing Federation, the CBI and the Institute for Fiscal Studies and revisit right to buy for housing association stock, which will lead to a decrease in the availability of affordable homes for rent and deal instead with the fundamental problem of housing supply.
Well, can I welcome the honourable gentleman to this House? This government is firmly on the side of those people who want to have the right to buy their own properties. That includes the right to buy and extending it to housing association properties. Maybe he will agree with his honourable friend, the member for Birkenhead, who published a report with the IPPR in recent years, calling on his party to do exactly the same thing.
Julian Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many hard-working homeowners in my constituency, Solihull, take in lodgers in order to meet mortgage repayments. However, the rent-a-room tax-free threshold has remained unchanged at £4,250 a year since 1997. Now the deficit is being paid down, wouldn't it be a positive step to help aspirational homeowners to raise the rent-a-room tax-free threshold?
Well, can I also welcome my honourable friend to this chamber? He clearly brings a wealth of experience in this area, and he's right to highlight, Mr. Speaker, the fact that one can rent a room out and receive the first £4,250 tax-free. And I note the point that he makes. My right honourable friend is sitting beside me, and no doubt he will take that as a budget submission and consider it as part of that.
Following on from that question, one of the areas that everyone admits is part of a problem in the tax gap is collecting tax on rental properties. Would the Minister agree that there will be a Treasury study on how to deal with the tax gap on rental properties, how big it is and how we can challenge it? Yeah.
The Honourable Lady is right to highlight it is very important to recognise that while the first £4,250 in terms of rent is covered by the allowance, that once rent goes above that level, it is a taxable income, and HMRC are constantly looking at ways in which they can improve the collection rates in that area.
Mr. Speaker, as the Prime Minister pledged before the election, this government will not cut child benefit.
Ruth Smith.
In my constituency, there were reports of children returning to school in September malnourished as their parents were struggling to afford to feed them. Does he agree that cuts to either child benefit or child tax credit would exacerbate the problem and make the issue of holiday hunger all the more common?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we have been very clear. The Prime Minister himself has been extremely clear, categorically, that child benefit stays as is. The most important thing, of course, in terms of affordability for household budgets is to increase employment and make sure people are in good jobs, and the government's also done an awful lot on bearing down on household costs to make more affordable.
Mr. Sanak.
Can my right honourable friend
tell my constituents in Richmond what this government will continue to do to keep cutting the cost of childcare for hard-working families.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the coalition government had a very strong record on extending childcare, and we're going to go much further in this Parliament with the extension for 15 to 30 hours of childcare for 3- and 4-year-olds for working parents, the introduction of tax-free credits, and, of course, further extension of childcare provision under universal credit when that migration happens.
Stephen Metcalfe.
Number 14, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, we have committed in our manifesto to protect the science capital budget of £6.9 billion up to 2021. Decisions on the wider science budget will take place at the spending review.
Metcalfe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was grateful to my right honourable friend for protecting the science budget during the last government, but the flash cash settlement agreed in 2010 is now worth 15% less than it was. Will he agree to look at that and at least make good that loss when preparing the budget and going to the spending review, so that our excellent science for that space can play its full part in delivering our long-term economic plan?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I once again congratulate my honourable friend on his excellent election result in Basildon, and note that he has served 5 years to date on the Parliamentary Science and Technology Committee, so I don't think many in the House take a stronger interest. He will also know that our capital funding for science almost doubled in the last Parliament. We take science very seriously, but wider decisions on science funding will be dealt with in the spending review.
Mrs. Helen Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Traditionally, Britain has been absolutely brilliant at basic science, but less good at translating that into innovation for industry. What's the government going to do to address that issue?
Well, Mr. Speaker, she makes a reasonable point, but this is why we've increased spending on innovation, including the new catapult centres and a whole host of other projects in the last Parliament. We look forward to doing more in this Parliament.
Christian Matheson.
Number 15, sir.
Minister.
The UK's productivity has been lower than the G7 average since OECD records began 45 years ago. In the last Parliament, we took a number of steps to increase the UK's productivity in the long run, including cutting the corporation tax rates to the lowest in the G20 and investing in skills, infrastructure and science. The Chancellor will set out what further action this government will take to boost productivity in our productivity plan to be published before the budget.
Matheson.
Can I thank the Minister for that reply? In Chester, the number of people on apprenticeships continues to decline, and these are Conservative-style, cheap and cheerful apprenticeships with little added value at the end. So can I ask the Minister, was the creation of a low-skilled, low-wage economy an intention of the government, or was it an unintended byproduct?
Good question.
Well, I have to say, on the subject of Chester, unemployment fell over the course of that last Parliament by 49%. And I would have thought that he would have welcomed that. The reality is that we are investing in apprenticeships. We saw 2.2 million people undertake apprenticeships in the last Parliament. We will increase that to 3 million in the next Parliament.
Crispin Blunt.
Following the crash, the remarkable record of the economy was that unemployment didn't rocket up more post-2008-2009. Now, in my constituency, it's the labour market that is very tight. And can I ask the government frontbench to focus very hard on improving productivity, because this is where the improvement in our economy must now come from.
Now, I entirely agree with my honourable friend, and in terms of improving our infrastructure, in terms of improving our skills, ensuring we have a competitive tax system, all of those approaches can help drive up productivity.
Cox.
Speaker. According to the OBR, if productivity growth per worker was closer to 4%, our national debt would be around £350 billion lower by the end of this Parliament. The OECD confirmed that continued weak productivity could lead to a higher than expected budget deficit. Why doesn't he realise that his failures on productivity explain why we're doing so badly on bringing down the deficit?
Well, I've said productivity is important. One element of that is attracting more business investment into the UK. That requires a government that is pro-business. And I'm not sure, I would say to the Honourable Lady, her ambition to make the Honourable Member for Islington North Prime Minister, I'm not sure will help.
Kevin Hollingray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to the World Economic Forum, in 2010, the UK had the second highest burden of red tape in the G7. By 2015, we have the lowest. Does the Minister agree that this alone will have a significant impact on productivity in the UK?
Yes, my honourable friend makes an important point. Regulations which are burdensome and do not achieve their objective do nothing to help productivity. They hold businesses back, and it's right that we've pursued our policy of, for every new regulation we bring in, to taken out.
Order. Topical questions. Mike Weir.
Number one, Mr. Speaker.
Chancellor.
Mr. Speaker, the core purpose of the Treasury is to ensure the stability and prosperity of the economy. I can report to the House the latest inflation figures show that CPI inflation is at 0.1%. This is good news for working families, with inflation close to an all-time low, while wages are now growing strongly. It's further proof that our long-term economic plan is working.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Chancellor for that response, but also one of his responsibilities is to make sure that correct tax is paid. Given the huge public support for a bill to tackle tax dodging, will he introduce such a measure in this Parliament to deal with the tax avoidance by UK companies, both in the UK and in developing countries?
Well, every single finance bill we've introduced in this Parliament has been about tackling tax evasion and tax avoidance. Indeed, we've also introduced into this country the diverted profits tax, almost the first in the world, which is tackling those international businesses that move their profits offshore to avoid tax. And I can tell him that in the budget we're going to take further action to clamp down on avoidance and evasion.
Mr. Glyn Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the Chancellor announced a simple new rule to ensure we run a surplus in normal times. Now, does he agree that the party opposite's description of this as no more than a distraction proved that no lessons have been learned, and they would make exactly the same mistakes if they were ever given the opportunity again?
Order. I'm sure the honourable gentleman, who is a seasoned hand, was asking a question about the government's intentions. I'm sure he wasn't asking about opposition policy, and the Chancellor won't answer about opposition policy.
Of course, perish the thought, Mr. Speaker. The government will be bringing forward its new approach to fiscal policy at the budget. That will include a commitment to a surplus in normal times, and we look forward to wide cross-party support for that approach.
Mr. Christopher Leslie.
Mr. Speaker, tomorrow the House of Commons will be debating productivity, probably the central challenge facing our economic recovery. Will the Chancellor of the Exchequer be leading for the government in response to that debate?
No, I won't be.
Mr. Leslie.
Mr. Speaker, he clearly feels that productivity is not a priority of his. I'm very surprised that the Chancellor is not going to be responding on this central question. After all, Mr. Speaker, he is going to be here acting as Prime Minister in PMQs tomorrow. If I can just bring him a little bit back to the economy and maybe rein in his own personal ambitions for a moment, I'd like the Chancellor to set out where productivity features in his own ambitions. And while we've got him today, because he's obviously not bothered about this tomorrow, can he just explain to the House why did he fail to mention productivity at all in his March budget speech just 3 months ago?
The Exchequer.
Well, I never thought I'd say bring back Ed Balls, but I think the Labour Party need to look at the productivity of its own front bench after those two dismal questions. But I spoke in the Mansion House about the importance of raising the productivity of the United Kingdom, a challenge, as he knows, that has existed for many decades. And at the budget, we will bring forward further proposals to tackle the productivity gap in skills, in infrastructure, in the regional imbalance of our economy. And maybe the Labour Party could get some credible economic spokesman and they can take part in the debate.
Caroline Noakes.
Pensioners in Romsey and Southampton North have welcomed the new freedoms that they have over their pensions. Can I ask my right honourable friend what evidence he has that they are taking advantage of those new freedoms?
Well, we on this side of the House believe we should trust people who have worked hard and saved hard with those savings in retirement. And, of course, these unprecedented pension freedoms have been widely welcomed. I can give the House the latest numbers, indeed the first numbers we have, to see how many people have taken advantage of these freedoms. So far, in just the few weeks since they came into effect, 60,000 people have made use of them, and over £1 billion of money has been transferred as a result out of people's pension funds. It's a sign that this is a real success, but of course we've got to make sure people get the best advice, that the market responds, that companies up their game in helping customers make use of these freedoms, and we will be watching these things very carefully.
David Crosby.
Given that the population of Greater Manchester is bigger than both Wales and Northern Ireland and not far short of the population of Scotland, why are the people of Greater Manchester being denied the opportunity to decide whether they want a directly elected mayor or not? What's wrong with a constitutional referendum in England for a change?
Well, I'm sorry to hear that he is disagreeing with the Labour civic leadership across the authorities of Greater Manchester. They are elected, of course, and the elected national government came together to put together this deal. I think it will increase accountability in Greater Manchester because there will be an elected mayor who people can hold directly to account.
Mike Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The latest ONS figures show that disposable household income was rising more quickly in the West Midlands than anywhere else in the country. Will the Chancellor consider creating further local enterprise zones, such as at the waterfront in Dudley South, to help create further local growth, opportunities and prosperity for my constituents?
Well, can I welcome my honourable friend to the House? I know he will be a strong voice for Dudley. And can I say to him that we are looking now at smaller enterprise zones that are better fitted to areas such as the one he represents, on top of the success we've had with the bigger enterprise zones. So we have individual enterprise zones in individual towns, and this will help the West Midlands and indeed the Black Country be an engine of growth for the British economy.
Richard Bergen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the Chancellor aware of the letter in Friday's Guardian by 80 senior economists in which they say, and these are their words, that his plans are risky experiments with the economy to score political points, have no basis in economics and, to quote, are not fit for the complexity of a modern 21st century economy? Doesn't this go to show that the Chancellor's extreme cuts agenda is out on a limb and his ideological fixations are quite simply outside the economic mainstream?
Thank you. Chancellor.
Well, I don't actually read The Guardian every single day, but I was made aware of that letter. Look, frankly, I disagree, and the same sorts of people were saying the same things 5 years ago, and now we've got one of the fastest-growing economies of any major economy in the world. But, you know, this isn't going to be the first thing I disagree with him on. I think this morning he called for the abolition of the monarchy, so he's making an interesting start to his political career.
Mr. John Barron.
As the economy continues to recover and the deficit falls, will the Chancellor consider increasing funding to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, given that continual cuts under successive governments have reduced its capacity and its skill base to such an extent many people are saying that it's hindered our recent foreign policy decisions?
Well, first of all, can I say to my honourable friend, I know he takes a close interest in this issue, and indeed he has been in contact with me about it. We absolutely want to make sure that Britain's diplomatic reach is as wide as possible across the world, and we should commend my former colleague, William Hague, during his period as Foreign Secretary, who, despite the Foreign Office, of course, playing its part in delivering value for money and getting the best deal for taxpayers, was able to open more embassies and consulates around the world and increase Britain's footprint on the global stage.
Graham Jones.
Mr. Speaker, his government keeps talking about this Tory fantasy of a Northern Powerhouse, which I must say never mentions the word Lancashire. Can I ask the Chancellor of the Exchequer, can I ask the Chancellor of the Exchequer, is it still his government's policy on the Treasury revenues from fracking that 1% will go to Lancashire and over 60% will go to Whitehall?
Well, I think I actually gave the original speech on the Northern Powerhouse in Lancashire, if we... if we count Manchester as being in the traditional county of Lancashire.
Mr. Jones, it is unseemly. I thought you were on an apprenticeship to become a statesman. But he's got a long way to travel. It's courteous to hear the Chancellor. Let's hear him.
I think it'll be one of those 4-year apprenticeships at this rate. But I'll say to the honourable gentleman something which I know is not universally agreed with, but I think the potential for shale gas in the north of England is a massive boost to the local economy there. I know it's not always popular with some local communities. That's why we've made sure that the benefits go to local communities, and indeed we committed in our manifesto to creating a sovereign wealth fund for the north of England for the revenues from shale gas exploration, so that we get a lasting benefit to the natural resources of that part of our country.
On the subject of statesmanship, Mr. Michael Fabricant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend has been enthusiastic and proactive in promoting the Northern Powerhouse. But can I ask him to shift his gaze southwards towards the Midlands and suggest to him that the Midlands has the productivity that the United Kingdom needs, and the Midlands engine needs promotion too?
Well, I absolutely agree with my honourable friend, and that's why I recently was in both Derby and Birmingham after the election, stressing the point that there is a massive potential for the Midlands to be this engine of growth, and I'm sure Lichfield will be a key part of that engine.
We're streeting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the Chancellor agrees with me that pro-business parties are also pro-European parties. So when's he going to come off the fence and confirm he's going to be leading the charge for Britain to stay in Europe?
Chancellor.
What we're fighting for is Britain to be part of a reformed European Union, and now we have finally persuaded the Labour Party to come to its senses and support this referendum. We can get on with the business of negotiating a good deal for this country.
Richard Fuller.
Speaker, may we have a Treasury review in how effectively the balance sheets of housing associations are meeting the challenge of building new housing, in particular looking at their average cost of capital, the amount of leverage, and whether a change in their accounting policy will help meet the housing challenge?
Well, I think my honourable friend, who, by the way, I congratulate on his re-election, I enjoyed visiting him in Bedford just before the election, I think he raises an interesting point about how efficient housing associations are in doing what we want them to do, which is to increase the housing supply, and that is something we're certainly looking at the moment.
Cunningham. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Given that the Chancellor wants to create the West Midlands Powerhouse, what is he doing to protect the powers and the identity of local authorities like Coventry?
Well, I met with the local authority leaders of Coventry and Birmingham and the other surrounding authorities just a couple of weeks ago, and I made it very clear to them it is up to those authorities to come together in a combination that suits them, that reflects local identities, and that my door is open to having any discussion that they want to have.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Further to my right honourable friend's reply to the member for Brigg and Goole earlier, both my honourable friend and I are big supporters of further devolution to northern Lincolnshire so that the economy can expand at an even faster rate. Can the Chancellor assure me that he will support any proposals that come forward from the leadership of local authorities?
I can absolutely give my honourable friend that assurance, and can I say that because of his campaigning and the campaigning of our right honourable friend from Brigg and Goole, we've made sure that northern Lincolnshire is part of this Northern Powerhouse concept and that it's not left behind or neglected as it was under Labour government.
Roger Mullin.
Speaker, the last Chancellor to run a budget surplus was Gordon Brown, thanks to a sell-off of gold at a rock-bottom price. Now we have this government pursuing a budget surplus by selling off RBS at a loss. When are we likely to get a banking strategy rather than a costly political gimmick?
Chancellor.
Well, I never thought I'd hear the member for Kirkcaldy and Calnbeath admit that we sold the gold at the wrong price, but it is... and can I very much welcome him to this House. Look, on the Royal Bank of Scotland, we have a serious decision to make, which is, do we continue to believe that at some point we might get the money back that the last Labour government put in, or do we actually take the advice of the independent reports that have been commissioned and the Governor of the Bank of England that now is the right time to start selling RBS, and indeed that might stimulate a higher share price. But above all, it will help support the British banking system. We have had countless questions in this House about the impact on small businesses of what went wrong at RBS. I think the sooner we can get that business back into the private sector, the more we can support the general economy and indeed give a great future to the workforce of RBS.
Mr. Graham.
Mr. Speaker, the government's support for more, better and higher apprenticeships has been absolutely critical to the halving of youth unemployment in Gloucester over the last year. But the other side of the equation is making sure that work always pays. Many of us want to play a part in making sure that happens, and universal credit is the key. It comes to Gloucester later this summer. What does my right honourable friend think will be the tangible and intangible benefits of seeing people able to work longer than 16 hours, increase their income and reduce welfare benefits?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right that universal credit, the major reform of our welfare system that will be widely felt in this Parliament, is going to create a very simple system where people know that if they work that extra hour, they will be rewarded for that. And that simplicity and the fact that you can keep more of your income by working that extra hour, I think, will be a powerful incentive that makes work pay.
We're very constrained for time. In fact, we've run out of it. But, Mr. Sammy Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, as a consequence of the refusal by Sinn Féin and the SDLP to implement welfare reform, the Northern Ireland Assembly gave authority to the departments to breach spending limits and increase spending by 6% over the block grant. What steps is the Chancellor going to take to ensure that assemblies and parliaments across the United Kingdom do not recklessly breach spending limits, increasing them?
Chancellor.
Well, the honourable gentleman raises a very serious question, which I suspect this House is going to have to come back to on a number of occasions. We have a clear agreement in the Stormont House Agreement, which we now expect all parties in Northern Ireland to implement, including Sinn Féin. And frankly, it is not acceptable for any one devolved administration to simply breach the limits that have been agreed with the United Kingdom government. So that is something we are going to have to address. But as he knows, the key is implementing the welfare reforms that not only deliver value for money for the taxpayer, but also make sure that more people in Northern Ireland are released from the poverty trap and able to work.
Stephen Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, borrowing costs across Europe increased as the contagion from the Greek economic crisis spread. Can I congratulate the Chancellor on the long-term economic plan, which, of course, in contrast, has brought jobs and growth to the UK economy? And can I urge him to use the budget to reduce deficit, to increase it in infrastructure, such as the £250 million needed for Crossrail 2, which will bring even more jobs to my constituency and to the UK?
Yeah. Well, my honourable friend is right to remind the House, after an hour and 5 minutes of Treasury questions, that out there in the real world, there are some very serious economic risks, not least the risk we now see growing in Greece of a potential default and a potential exit from the euro. And people should not underestimate the potential damage that would do to financial confidence. Of course, in the UK, we take all steps to prepare and protect ourselves from such eventualities. But the best thing you can do is to make sure you are living within your means, you have indeed a productive economy, and that your public finances are in good order, and that is what we're going to deliver in this Parliament.
Order. I'm sorry, but demand has exceeded supply.